these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back to Hold These Truths. And look, we have an important conversation today. Not a new conversation. It's one you've heard quite a few times on this podcast. But we do have a special guest who can speak to what HHS has been doing in a recent study that came out about gender-affirming care. Or gender-affirming treatment, as we like to call it, because I don't think we could really call it care. This is a thing that was once fringe ideology and then infiltrated our medical institutions, our schools, even the legal system. Parents stripped of their rights, lied to, tricked. The list goes on. Andrew, thanks for being on.
Congressman, it's an honor to be with you.
You're at HHS. You're a senior advisor to Secretary Kennedy.
Yes. So it's been a wonderful opportunity here with the Trump administration as we get into these issues where in Congress, you guys are really setting the bar high in terms of stopping funding for these procedures. But we've been looking at how to reset the table on getting gold standard science that we think will support exactly what you've done in Congress.
Yeah, and quite quickly, one of the first things you guys did was come out with a systematic review on the supposed benefits of gender-affirming treatments, and basically found the same thing that the what I've often touted on this podcast, the CAS review found. Another systematic review, I think many would consider the current gold standard, because it's been peer-reviewed. It's studied whatever, like 100 other systematic reviews or studies, and found a lot of problems and methodologies and across all of the studies that are often cited by this radical ideology left, in telling parents the lies and telling kids the lies about, this is good for you. You're less likely to commit suicide. There's like a 2% regret rate. All of it's untrue, or at least unprovable within the methodologies that they use. So tell us about how you guys. So this is a sprint. I mean, I don't even know when did you actually even start work?
Well, it began with the president's executive order protecting children from surgical chemical mutilation, which was done 1 week after he took office. So immediately after that, we went into a sprint, like you said, to assemble a team of 9 experts in this field that worked round the clock for the next 3 months to dig into all of the research. They did leave over 3,000 studies, over 17 systematic reviews that were reviewed. They went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and they found the evidence for these procedures was just incredibly weak. And it revealed what we can get into is one of the biggest scandals, I think, in medical history.
Yeah, so I mean, let's go through how that process actually plays out so people understand it. What is a systematic review versus a study and a clinical trial? Sure.
So a systematic review is you start with a research question, and then you look broadly at studies that fit within that research question, and so it's seen as the highest, at least in the pyramid of evidence that field of evidence-based medicine weighs. Systematic reviews stand at the top because they're more insulated from the kinds of biases and one-off errors that can result from different studies that are taken individually.
Right, it's an aggregation of all sorts of data as opposed to cherry picking, right?
Exactly.
And 3,000 plus studies. I'm surprised there was even that many on this subject.
There are. Unfortunately, many of them have various deficiencies.
What are some? Do you have any highlights of the biggest, worst ones that are often the most cited but also biggest lies of studies? Top of your mind? It might be a tough question, but.
Yeah, a few of them come to mind, but in some cases, some of the studies that they were looking at that were on this subject had to be excluded because they included adults. And other times, we saw in terms of the methodology, there was issues with the types of, how they narrowed the questions helped influence the results. So, for example...
Well, that's actually reversal, because you said it starts with a question. What was the question?
Well, the question is sort of what is the effects of the prescription of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries on children? Does it improve? Okay. Does it improve their mental health? Was often a question that was looked at some of these reviews, but what many of them didn't look at was what are the effects on their physical bodies, which are being changed in irreversible ways by these procedures. So in some cases, that methodological flaw was something that the researchers identified across many of these studies.
No, and I've brought that up too. Yeah, you look at a lot of these studies and they say, well, I mean, this proves it, but it's like, well who was your pool of patients? And they're adults. So that doesn't answer the question at all about how this affects kids, let alone longitudinal studies. I mean, a lot of them are also very short term, right? I assume you found that. Steel manning a crazy person's argument. Was there anything that was even like remotely used a good methodology at all? That came to any kind of conclusions? I mean, even if it's just like one out of, it still doesn't change the ultimate conclusion, but I'm curious if there's anything at all.
What they found was across the systematic reviews they looked at, as well as the other reviews, that it was just incredibly weak evidence. So, nothing is absolute when you're talking about probabilities, but the point that was looked at objectively, and it's a reproducible methodology, so people can go back and look and check our work. But it found the results, the conclusions of some of these studies aren't supported by the evidence cited.
Yeah. That's a lot of bias involved. Okay. Now, in some of the critiques you've gotten since you guys released this, was how long of a document is it?
It's 409 pages, I believe.
Okay, just some easy
and
reading.
An appendix or 180 pages, I believe. So,
okay.
Light reading, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's because the team wanted to be incredibly thorough, and they knew this would be held rightfully to a very high standard, and we feel like we've met the bar.
Yeah. So then, if somebody wants to kind of summarize the 400 pages, like how is it even categorized? Like, what do you deal with? I guess certain myths, and then how do you organize it?
Yeah, so there's a helpful for people who want to jump to the Cliff Notes.
Which is going to be everybody.
Which is everyone, right?
Yeah,
the Cliff Notes is a good place to start. There's an overview forward that goes through the chapters at a high level, and it does address some of the myths. So one of the biggest myths out there is that these sex trait modification procedures, I think genital mutilation procedures, they're not life-saving like so many of these medical organizations, WPATH and others have called it. They declare them to be life-saving, but that's often this kind of circular reasoning that's not supported by the evidence.
Yeah, and also circular citations, right? Which is another thing. Either you found that or the CAST review found that. Maybe you both did. But I think when you look at the studies, they tend to cite each other as the evidence, and it's not science at all, right?
Yes, so WPATH and the Endocrine
propaganda.
Society is a great example where they cite one another to come to the same conclusions.
Yeah, that's a little frightening. And then you guys have gotten criticism because it's not peer reviewed yet. So explain. So let's talk about that and how this why that's an unfair argument and how this process is supposed to play out.
Well, in terms of the peer review itself, there's
anonymous citations. There's a few other critics that
Sure.
they're saying these things, but there's also some good reasons as to why it is the way it is. So I want to let you.
So a few of the
address
chapters were subject to peer review prior to its publication, and there's a peer review process which is about to kick off, which will give an opportunity for a wide range of individuals and stakeholders to weigh in on the document in terms of assessing its arguments and making sure it's up to snuff. And we feel confident in what we have, but there's always that opportunity to improve a product. So we're going to definitely kick that off very shortly. And like the CAST review started, there was an interim report, and then there was a final report that was issued last year. So we feel in the similar path.
Is that I guess what point I'm getting at is if people who aren't usually educated in the ways of systematic reviews in the medical fields, this is a normal process. There's an initial release of a report, and then there's a peer review. People can read it, and then there's a peer review process that also occurs, and then a second edition release of the report, maybe in a journal, whatever. Is that
yes? So
accurate?
we're doing this in a way that the public, and we want them to feel confident. That's been subjected to the highest standards.
Yeah. The other critique is I think some sources or authors kept anonymous. There's a good reason for that.
So as of now, the authors have not been named. However, like you were saying, many of them, are rightfully concerned, or should be concerned that the environment we're in is such that the attacks on their persons are very real.
Yeah.
So we want to protect that during the peer review process.
Right. So some others are current practicing healthcare professionals in various places.
Some of them are research methodologists, and others are academics. But together they are a pretty formidable bunch that put this together.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that they have that freedom during the peer review process too.
Yeah. Well, so there's only 9?
There's 9 of them.
Only 9. Okay. Geez, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to do in a few months. So congratulations for 9 people. How do you think, just taking a step back, how do you think this became such a problem? I mean, your regular American citizen doesn't believe in this stuff. The polls have shown that for quite a while. And I think depending on how you ask the question, you'd probably get like a 90% rate, against at least for minors. But I think people are genuinely concerned that this is even a thing at all for kids, and I think we struggle to figure out why that even is. And even looking at these issues for a long time, how does that happen? And maybe you can tie that into some of the things you found. You were telling me about before we started recording about some of the, as you said, some of the dark stuff that you found from the past administration on how they, emails and messaging and conversations that they had to sort of promote this freaking insane ideology.
Yes, I think that's the right way to put it. It was ideology first, and there's a long discussion in the review talking about how the process of so-called sex changes began in adults, and then in the Netherlands began being pushed onto children. And the original Dutch protocols came out of that. And then in the United States, the story sort of shifted to a group that today is known as WPATH, the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, which their most recent guidelines have formed the standard of care for the transgender identifying population for many years, and their most recent edition promotes surgical chemical mutilation of children, and it does so in a way that eliminated even their initial proposal for age minimums. So when it comes to these irreversible surgical procedures for kids, like girls being subjected to mastectomies. So the story, in many ways, flows through this process where it began in these sort of overseas in the Netherlands, and then it kind of came over to the United States and through WPATH and through
And the Dutch
politicians.
protocols are often cited by
Right.
supporters of this ideology. But I think it's important to note that the Dutch protocol wasn't the American protocol. WPATH went quite a step further than the Dutch protocol. The Dutch protocol, I think, still requires some form of psychotherapy before going full crazy. Does it not?
That's absolutely correct. And it's interesting that you bring up psychotherapy, because that's been another line of attack on the report. But psychotherapy is
that's
the first line of
answer.
treatment.
That's the answer. I've been getting that heat for a long, because obviously my real bill on this that I want to pass, I just can't pass it through reconciliation, as you know. Which I, again, appreciate your help actually getting this other bill drafted. But the real bill, the one I think would really work, is our Children's Hospital GME funding bill, because they can't say no to that. GME funding, of course, is graduate medical education, so there's a portion of federal funding that goes to subsidized residency programs within hospitals. We all agree on it. It's a great program. You need it. But you know what? Maybe if you're mutilating children, you shouldn't get it. And you know what? They need it bad enough where I think we all agree that they would stop. That's why that was the original bill. I'd love to get that still passed one day, or just make this freaking illegal. That's another good option too. Just fully illegal, like we do in Texas. So anyway, sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, there's actually a whole chapter in the report on these children's hospitals in the United States and how their protocols are, in some measures, you could within 2 hours obtain
insane
hormones.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's just hey, it's insane. Well, I mean, in my original question was trying to, and you're not going to be able to answer it. I don't expect an answer, because I don't know the answer, and I'm a pretty thoughtful guy, I think, or at least people, at least my my dog tells me that. I don't understand the psychology behind the ideology. You know, when we say the word ideology, I have ideologies, you have ideologies. Those ideologies maybe tend to be based on some kind of conservative tenets that sort of live in a box of that's been created through history, as I would define conservatism. The thing about progressivism is it's a little weird because it's progressing all the time. This is what I point out to people. It progresses eventually towards just crazier and crazier things because it's in its nature. It has to keep changing. They win a battle, well, they need a new battle. You know, I mean, it's 5 minutes ago they were against gay marriage. Like it wasn't that long ago. You know, and without limiting principles, I think you've got a really dangerous ideology. And what's your explanation? But well, actually, no, but then there's the propaganda piece that you guys found at HHS. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So, you know, the previous administration had made promoting the mutilation of children a top priority, and Rachel Lavine, the then admiral, who identifies as transgender.
What was her position again? What was she? I forgot.
The Assistant Secretary for Health.
Okay.
So
yeah.
a high-ranking HHS official pressured the WPATH to drop the age minimum, like we were saying.
Really?
Age minimum.
You guys have
for
emails to
vasectomies.
support this?
So the emails that came out on this particular one actually came out of litigation, and Alabama was sued. It was the biggest own goal of the transgender movement was when they sued Alabama. And Discovery produced...
Why did they sue Alabama?
Over its ban on the transgender procedures for
They
children.
did the same thing we did in Texas.
That's correct. And as you know, the Supreme Court is, I'm sure your listeners are maybe following that.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court is hearing a case along these lines in Scarametti.
Yeah. I think our Supreme Court will probably do the right thing, but we'll see.
I hope so.
Okay,
but
so in the course of that,
Lavine,
that's when those emails came out.
So those emails showed clear as day that Lavine was meddling in the WPATH guidelines directly.
Huh.
And we certainly know he was going down to travel down there and going to their conferences. But the upshot of it is this isn't the only thing WPATH was doing that showed that they took politics into consideration over the evidence. They also commissioned systematic reviews from Johns Hopkins and others, but then when it became clear that they were not supportive of their preferred policy outcome of, on-demand hormones and surgeries for kids, they suppressed these findings as well as other systematic reviews in the context of drafting their clinical guidelines. And there was also issues with conflicts of interest that were failed to be managed among the people who were involved. But they had requirements that when they looked at studies, they had to effectively look positively on this. So they truly, it wouldn't meet any bar, and it certainly, the Europeans that have looked at this, looked at the WPATH guidelines, there was one review that found they were very low quality, and they lacked transparency.
Yeah.
So
Not
those are the
evidence-based.
guidelines that decide whether it's covered in insurance today. A lot of health insurance companies rely on WPATH. There are some Medicaid, state Medicaid programs that rely on the WPATH guidelines. And it's all based on junk science.
Yeah.
And the previous administration promoted it. The Department of Health and Human Services issued its own guidelines, promoted out of the Office of Population Affairs, that said these procedures were life-saving, that it was a civil right, not just that it was even evidence-based, and we've rescinded that guidance that said that the Obamacare non-discrimination provision said you would violate the law if you didn't provide these hormones to kids. So there was a concerted effort to weaponize the federal government.
Yeah. DOJ as well. I mean, they went after a Houston-based doctor,
Ethan
Heim, and for exposing, or basically being a whistleblower and trying to accuse him of HIPAA violations. Of course, that charge was a bit nonsensical considering it was anonymous data that he was revealing. I've had other whistleblowers talk to me about Medicaid fraud on this. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit. How do we, now that we have an administration that isn't crazy, how do we deal with Medicaid fraud, which obviously falls directly within HHS guidelines? Because what happens is, and this was happening in Texas. I don't think it still is, because I think they're rightfully more risk averse to doing this craziness. But Medicaid is about checking a box, or Medicare. Same with Medicare, right? Or any kind of insurance, right? You want a payment done, you need to check a code, and the code isn't necessarily transgender surgery. That's not the code. The code is endocrine therapy. something along those lines. So you can just say endocrine therapy, and what you're really doing is, the hormone or puberty blockers, but it just goes into the system as endocrine therapy. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that? I'm sure this is on your guys' radar.
It absolutely is. So getting at the abuse of the Medicaid program is a high priority for us. And we've actually the department released whistleblower protection guidance to address the situation with Dr. Heim, to make sure that doesn't happen again. And also to make sure future whistleblowers can come forward to the department and let us know. In fact, there's this law called the False Claims Act that allows for whistleblower protections when federal funds are being abused. So we think this is an important area where the department has a program integrity function that should be protecting people like Dr. Heim and encourage them to come forward rather than prosecuting them like the previous administration.
Is that our only method of rooting this out, is hoping that whistleblowers come forward? Is there any other, and is there something we should be doing legislatively to assist you in preventing fraud? I don't like that oftentimes in our own Republican parlance, we just kind of say, waste, fraud, abuse. Okay. There's a lot of details behind those words. And I wish it were as simple as just make a law that says there's no waste, fraud, and abuse. Wouldn't that be nice?
I think you're doing that in the big, beautiful bill.
We're doing a lot of it. But on this particular issue with Medicaid fraud, what else can we be doing? Or how do we root that out? Without, if there's no whistleblower in that particular hospital saying what's happening, what are our chances of rooting this kind of thing out?
Well, I can't get ahead of what the department might do in the coming weeks and months. But what I can say is that what you've done in the big, beautiful bill will make absolutely clear that Medicaid cannot cover hormones, surgeries, and other experimental procedures. I think the CBO score that just came out showed $2.5 billion in savings. So it's hard.
There's actually some savings.
That's a lot of waste.
That is, just patting ourselves on the back. We got almost $1 trillion of savings out of just our committee. Despite being accused recently that that bill is just nothing but a spending giant full of pork. I don't know where that accusation came from, but it's nonsense. We actually did a pretty hard work in actually saving some money. So I think I found it to be one of the more rewarding work processes in Congress that it felt actually very bottom up, which was an unusual exercise. All right, so you guys have perhaps plans that I forget that I'm talking to administration officials. You guys are very cautious, understandably so. As a politician, I don't have to be.
Well, the president's executive order is clear. We want to end these procedures for minors because they're harmful to kids. It's that simple.
And your assessment is once we pass the bill into law and clarify if it wasn't clear already, I suppose it wasn't illegal. I suppose it wasn't technically illegal before. And I guess, and that's the thing. So maybe it wasn't even what I'm talking about, the examples I'm using, where somebody's checking the box for endocrine therapy, and what they're really doing is a hormone blocker on a kid, that's technically not even illegal.
I can't speak to that specific question, but I can say is in the case of Dr. Heim, it was illegal in Texas.
It was illegal in Texas for sure.
And they were clearly covering it up.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, what future, agency action is, I think it's all options are on the table for what we can get done administratively and with Congress to stop taxpayer funding of this, to let entities that are currently harming kids know that they're on notice, that the evidence is out, and they can no longer hide behind the WPATH and these other organizations. They're completely exposed for the fraudulent guidelines that WPATH is. And now hospitals have been put on notice by the secretary in a letter that was sent last week, as well as Dr. Oz sent out some letters to these big children's hospitals that are harming kids, asking them, showing where's the evidence of that you are following the highest standards of clinical evidence, which is your moral and ethical and legal obligation to provide the highest standards of care. And we think there's a strong profit motive as well that is at play potentially for some of these hospitals that are providing this to get lifelong patients that will have complications that they'll have to deal with tragically for life.
It's wild. I mean, we've had this debate on the military side of things too. Like, no, they can totally serve. And I'm like, well, I was told I can't serve after losing an eye. Arguably less severe of a condition than a complete gender transformation that requires consistent care. And the surgeries involved there, I refuse to believe that these are well-developed surgical procedures. It's kind of, they're gruesome to think about, but for military readiness, it's an obvious non-starter. I think people are happy to see that at least their taxpayer dollars are not going to this kind of thing anymore. If you want to be an adult and pay for it yourself, just fly your freak flag. Okay, that's your thing. But you better not be asking anybody else to pay for it and then pay for your ongoing care that is required afterwards. And for God's sakes, maybe seek out therapy first. I mean that with complete compassion. Like it's not always the answer to change your body. And I often use the example this is, for some reason the left has made this feel not crazy to themselves, but you can quickly show some examples. And I use the example of my own eye, and my daughter likes to take my fake eye out and put it on her eye. Like she's learning the word eye now. She's like 1.5, and she's going to grow up with a one-eyed father because I don't think it's growing back. And unless you guys at HHS would fund some cool research for bionic eyes, maybe that's something you could work on. Write that down, please. But it's not happening anytime soon. So I'm like, okay, so what if she goes to the doctor and says, well, I'm actually I don't identify as binocular, I identify as monocular, just like my dad. So go ahead and enucleate my eye. That's fancy medical speak for take out your eye. That would be insane. Everybody would be like, that's a crazy thing to think about. That's a crazy thing to do. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And yet, that's arguably far less harmful to just your general sense of being a human than your entire gender being transitioned. Losing this one body part. And it sucks. Don't get me wrong. But at least you get to wear a cool patch and 12 different eyes that I sport. I would take that over a gender transition, any kind of therapy, any day. But one sounds crazy to everybody, and somehow the other one doesn't. Now, I would like to get your reaction to this. As we went on our 26-hour markup on energy and commerce, something interesting happened. The Democrats fought us for 26 hours, as we expected them to, and it was an all-nighter, all-day affair. All 2-day affair, and they had an amendment offered for every single provision and things to be said, and all this, of course. Not this one though. Not a single amendment against this provision, and nobody asked to speak about it either. I have a lot of experience battling this on the ENC because I've been doing it, been leading this charge in Congress for a while now. And I've been called a lot of names. We've had these debates quite a bit. The Democrats, would bring, I forget her name, but some crazy doctor from Yale, who I'm happy to say embarrassed by simply asking her if she had any studies to back up her claim that there was evidence-based medicine here, and she just kept saying the word it's standard of care. I'm like, that's just those are just words. You have to say why there's this, why those are the standards of care is what I'm asking. She had no reason. But my point is they fought us a lot on this for the last few years, and then all of a sudden they stopped, completely stopped. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's because this is an area where we have an alignment of the president's agenda and 80% of the American public.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at where the Democrats have gone on this issue, they went so far to the left that they really can't come back to the middle without admitting they harmed kids. And that's a lot to admit. It's, if you think about it, if you performed irreversible procedures, it could be a lot to even process for yourself to say, wow, I was complicit in this.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully this report can, for some people, serve as a golden bridge to say, look, we have evidence that we were misled. And it's time for Democrats, Republicans. In fact, several of the people who wrote this report are progressives in their own political preferences.
I know Democrats are like, I left the party because this, it just is too crazy. So, yeah, I mean, the evidence is the evidence, but the evidence has been there a while. I think the election kind of had an effect. I mean, that's the cynical answer, is that politics had an effect. They realized this is a losing battle, so don't do it. And it was a weird moment. It was a weird moment because people on the committee were like, just please do not. We're so close to the end, Dan. Please don't make them go crazy. And I was like, well, that's my thing. I have to speak on it. And I didn't poke them as to the extent that I couldn't. And we were all surprised that we got no response. And so I think it's a good thing. I'd love to see us all come together on this, and maybe eventually just ban it outright. But last words?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners, and it's so important what you're doing in Congress, what we're doing in the administration is to act and to protect kids. This is an area where the medical field has failed to regulate itself. And this is where government really has a role. And this report itself doesn't make policy recommendations, but it gives everything the administration and Congress need to act in the best interests of children. So appreciate your leadership on this issue, and we'd love to continue to work together on this shared goal of protecting our kids and ensuring ideology is not replacing the gold standard science that our kids deserve.
Andrew, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you,
for your work.
Congressman.